Hi, welcome again to Biblical Explorations. Today we're taking a look at, hopefully, Genesis 4, chapter 1, verses 4 and 5. We'll see how we do. Let's begin with the Hebrew text. Now remember, God has just created the light, and we discussed that last time. Vayara Elohim. So, and saw God. So in English, and God saw, as you can see over here. He saw et, that is the direct object marker. So he saw ha'ur, the light. And then ki tov, that means that it was, or that which is. Tov is good, straightforward, like you say, boker tov, good morning. So God saw that the light was good. God saw the light, it was good. Now, same thing happens, very straightforward in Greek and Latin. Kai iden, hotheos, tophos, hotikalon. Exactly the same thing. God saw the light, that it was good. Et videt Deus lucem quod esset bona. Exactly the same. So, basic idea is very straightforward. He saw that the light was good. Now, we've got to understand that this is an important concept because, number one, not everything in creation is good. Darkness is never mentioned as good, nor is tahom, this primordial chaotic matter. So, not everything is necessarily good. There is evil in creation, but what God sees, what he creates is fundamentally good. And this is an important concept because later on groups arise known as dualists who maintain that part of creation is good and part is not good. But for the biblical text here, the light was good. And then God does something very interesting. In the next verse here, wa and yabdal. This is to separate, to divide. Elohim, so God divided, and you can see here God separated the light from the darkness. Yabdal Elohim, God separated. Notice it's the plural noun, but it's got a singular verb, and therefore we understand it as God, not gods. Bain ha'ur, wa bain ha'choshek, which means between the light and between the darkness. So God separated the light from the darkness. More explicit translation is God divided between the light and between the darkness. Now, what he's doing here is creating boundaries and frontiers, and he's distinguishing between light and darkness. That's interesting because he creates light in the first place, and it seems to be kind of fused and intermixed with darkness. There's no clarity in the distinction between the two for some reason. When he comes, his kabod shines forth, but there's no, it's not organized yet. The first thing God does then is divide light from darkness. This creates organization, it creates clarity, it creates reality, it causes this separation. So God divides the light and the darkness. Greek and Latin, it's basically the same. Kai diachorasen hotheos anameson tu photos, kai anameson tu schotos, which is he divides between the light and between meso tu schotos. So it's very close to the Hebrew text. Latin is not so close. Et divisit, and they don't even add the deos here, but it's implied because there's the subject. Divisut Deus lucum ac tenebras. So God divided the light from the darkness. The basic idea is clear. There's this division going on between light and darkness. And I think that's interesting because it indicates the concept of creation by separation. God creates by separating pre-existent things into two new distinct type of things. As we're going to see, he divides the heavens from the earth, he divides the land from the water, he divides the male and female. He does all this type of division, which creates a order from chaos, because when everything is mixed and merged together, it's this ineffable one. I mean, it's indistinguishable. When he divides it, there's clarity, there's boundaries, there's order. So by dividing, he's creating order. This is a fundamental concept within the Hebrew Bible here. Notice what we've got here too is the development of creative acts. God said, so one thing God does is speaks. Another thing he does up above, remember, his spirit or his breath comes, so he breathes into things. He also sees things, God saw. Another is he divides, as you can see, God separated here. And then he speaks, but it's not saying words, but it is naming. It might be better here to say God named the light day, and the darkness he named night. In other words, God, by calling things, he's naming them. So these are some of the fundamental creative acts that God does in the Hebrew Bible. Number one, his ruach or his spirit comes and is breathed into things. Number two, he speaks. Number three, he sees. And as he sees, he judges. I mean, this is an implied judgment. To say that the light was good, it implies a judging and evaluation of the creation. He divides things, not light and darkness here, and then he also names things. And this is part of the ancient idea of nominalism, that by naming something you control it, you understand it. If you can name it, then you know it. If you can't name it, you don't know it. 21st century students don't really believe that. They think, well, I kind of have a vague knowledge, but they don't know the word. Well, that doesn't count. Not with God. You've got to know it. You've got to name it. And by being able to name it, it shows that you have power over it. And we'll see when Adam comes along, he names the animals, not God, and this gives him power and dominion over the animals and the created order. But at any rate, at this point, God is simply separating light from darkness. And now notice what he does in verse 5. Let's go look at the Hebrew. Wayikra, and this is to call, to speak, it could be to read. The Quran derives from this root. The Quran in Arabic means the reading, the recitation. So, Yikra Elohim, God called, or I would say named, Le'ur Yom, wa Lechoshek Kara Leila. So literally what this means, and God called to the light, Yom, and to the darkness he called. This is past tense. This is present, imperfect tense versus perfect tense. And then he called it the Layla, the night. So here you've got darkness equated with light, Choshek with Layla, and you've got light created with, or combined with day. So light and day, darkness and night. That's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's a fundamental cosmology, and throughout the universe throughout the world rather, is the concept of day and night as distinct and opposites. And that's exactly what's going on here. In the Greek and the Latin, you basically get the same type of thing. In verse 5 here, Kai ekalesen, God called, or that is, Hotheos is God, Tophos hemeran, Kai toskotos ekalesen nukta. And so he called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Same thing in Latin. Apelavetque. Now this is more like to name rather than to call in the Latin here. And he called, and notice again, the term God is dropped off because it's implied in the way Latin is structured here. He called the light day, and the night and darkness night.